Right, with that, let's also tell you how U.S. President Donald Trump has been facing political pressure in his own country as the Democrats have now escalated efforts to question his fitness for office. Well, more than 85 House and Senate Democrats are now calling for Trump to be either impeached or removed through the 25th Amendment. This move comes after Trump's recent remarks, including a whole civilization will die tonight, in a clear reference to Iran. Lawmakers have now introduced a striking proposal tied to the 25th Amendment, aiming to create a formal mechanism to assess whether Donald Trump can still serve. Under the proposal, congressional leaders will each appoint 2 members. It would include 4 former high-ranking executive branch officials, specifically vice presidents, secretaries of state, defense and treasury, attorneys general, and, of course, surgeon generals. The panel will include a final chair as well, selected by the commission itself, potentially a physician or a senior statesperson.
All right, crew, John speaking, time to turn it up. Let's cut through the noise. What is actually happening with impeachment, not what viral videos claim? Look at what lawmakers are actually saying, what advocacy groups are doing, the constitutional requirements, and the real political math. Understanding the gap between pressure and process is the only way to stay informed. Here is the verified baseline, the things we know for certain right now that you can take to the bank. There is no confirmed current House Judiciary Committee hearing on Trump impeachment. There is no confirmed active House impeachment inquiry. There is no Senate impeachment trial involving Trump happening right now. Let me repeat that because it's important. None of those things exist at this moment. What there is, and this is real, and it matters, is a growing number of Democratic lawmakers and advocacy organizations.
But removing Donald Trump remains unlikely, as this process requires the vice president, in this case of J.D. Vance, to agree with the commission's findings. Congress will then need a 2/3 majority vote in both chambers to make any removal permanent. Now, the 25th Amendment, remember, was formulated in 1967 after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It ensures a legal mechanism designating a head of state when the president is disabled or dead. It also includes provisions for both voluntary and involuntary removal of a president. The 25th Amendment was used by George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan for medical treatment. Now, supporters argue this legislation is about preparedness and not politics. The proposal comes as the Senate votes on Wednesday to curb Trump's Iran war powers and ahead of the November midterms that will determine Trump's power in the final 2 years of his presidency.
Pushing publicly for a 3rd impeachment effort. They are making the argument that Trump's conduct in office warrants it. They are calling for a committee action. They are drumming up public support. They are filing articles of impeachment in the House, which some members have actually done. And that is a documented public act that goes into the congressional record. All of that is real political activity. All of it is worth understanding. But none of it is the same as an active proceeding. And the gap between political pressure and actual congressional process is enormous. That gap is what most viral content on this topic either ignores or deliberately obscures.
And my colleague Susan Tehrani joins us live from New York at the moment to get us more on this. Susan, the Democrats, of course, upping the ante against Donald Trump as far as the Iran war is concerned. There is a lot of talk about the 25th Amendment being used. Get us more on how, now, of course, the opposition Democrats are planning to take this forward.
Yeah, this is just another, to be honest, blockbuster production brought to you by the same people that carried out 2 impeachments against the president during his first term, and then that January 6th commission that just dragged on, and an absolute nothing burger, for a lack of a better term, to waste everyone's time and resources. As you mentioned, the 25th Amendment was put forth in case a president gets assassinated, is sick, is injured. It wasn't put forth for someone to be removed from office because the other party simply doesn't agree with their policy.
Because political pressure does not convict a president. Only a Senate supermajority can do that. And we are very, very far from a Senate supermajority. The constitutional math is brutal, unforgiving, and it doesn't care about how many people share a video or how many comments a post gets. Here is the historical context that you need to have before any of this makes sense. Donald Trump is the only federal official in American history to have been impeached twice. The first time was in 2019. The House voted to impeach him on abuse of power and obstruction of Congress charges related to Ukraine. The Senate acquitted him in 2020.
And as you mentioned, it's not only that both houses are controlled by the Republicans right now. The Democrats know this isn't going to go anywhere. But is J.D. Vance going to come on board? Is the president's entire cabinet going to come on board? They have to come on board as well. So they know that this is not going to get anywhere, but unfortunately decided to take this course as opposed to more important issues put forth after they had a long recess for Easter. And the first thing that they did, they decided to put on something and put forth something that is absolutely not going to go through. So a lot of Americans are frustrated, understandably, right now. They want Congress to work for them, and they believe that because this is just absolutely, just unlawful in many ways, it's just going to be a waste of time. But it is going to, heat up the midterms and the conversation around that. So the Democrats are hoping they can change the conversation regarding that.
All right, Susan, thanks very much for joining us at the moment and getting us the latest.
The second time was in 2021. The House impeached him on a charge of incitement of insurrection related to the events of January 6th. The Senate acquitted him again in 2021. 2 impeachments, 2 Senate trials, 2 acquittals, and he went on to win the 2024 presidential election and is now serving his second term as president. So when people talk about a third impeachment, they are talking about doing something that has been done twice before with 2 consecutive Senate acquittals and which has not removed him from office. The political and constitutional math behind why this is so difficult is worth understanding in detail, and that is what we're going to give you here. Now, let me address one specific piece of misinformation that has been circulating because I want to be precise about it. If you have seen anything claiming that there is a specific impeachment trial happening involving Trump in the current year, be aware that the impeachment trial that has been showing up in some news feeds is not about Trump at all. It concerns the vice president of the Philippines and proceedings in the Philippine government. That is a completely separate story from a completely separate country. It has nothing to do with Trump or the United States Congress. And the fact that this confusion is spreading tells you something important about how easily the word impeachment gets attached to the wrong context when people are sharing things quickly without checking the details. All right. Let's go into the real substance, because the impeachment question, even without an active proceeding, is genuinely interesting as a political and constitutional story. And I want to give you the full picture. Layer 1 is the constitutional framework, and this is where most people's understanding has real gaps. Under the United States Constitution, a president can be removed from office on impeachment for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. The House of Representatives has the sole power to impeach, meaning only the House can bring charges. But impeachment by the House does not remove a president. It is the equivalent of an indictment, a formal accusation. The Senate then conducts a trial on those charges. And to convict and remove a president, you need a 2/3 supermajority of senators present. In today's Senate, where Republicans hold the majority, getting to 67 votes to convict would require a massive wave of Republican defections. Not a few, not a handful, a large, sustained, politically devastating wave of Republicans voting to remove their own president. And there is no evidence that is anywhere close to happening. None. So even if the House were to impeach Trump tomorrow, which it could not do with Republicans controlling the chamber, the Senate math alone makes conviction and removal essentially impossible under current conditions. That is the constitutional wall that stands between political pressure and actual removal. And it is important to understand that wall before you evaluate any of the political activity happening around impeachment right now. Layer 2 is what Democrats are actually doing and why they are doing it, even when they know the math doesn't work. Because this is where the story gets interesting. Some Democratic members of Congress have filed articles of impeachment against Trump. Articles are the formal charges similar to counts in an indictment. One representative filed 13 articles of impeachment, And that filing was real and went into the congressional record. More than 70 Democratic lawmakers have publicly supported impeachment or discussed the 25th Amendment option. And advocacy organizations, particularly a group called Free Speech for People, have been running active campaigns to build public and congressional pressure for impeachment. All of this is real political activity. So why are they doing it when they know the votes are not there to remove him? Several reasons. First, political signaling. Filing articles of impeachment, supporting impeachment publicly, calling for hearings, all of these send a message to Democratic voters and donors that these lawmakers are taking Trump's conduct seriously and not letting it go without a fight. That matters for fundraising, for base enthusiasm, and for the midterm cycle. Second, building a record. Every article of impeachment filed, every public statement of support, every hearing that does happen creates a record that can be pointed to during campaign season. It makes the case to voters that Democrats tried, that the opposition to Trump was not passive. Third, the Iran war connection. The specific constitutional argument that has given impeachment talk new energy is the war powers question. Some Democrats argue that Trump's conduct of military operations against Iran without proper congressional authorization rises to the level of an impeachable abuse of power. That is a live current argument, not a historical one, and it gives the impeachment conversation a fresh and specific hook that the earlier rounds of impeachment did not have. Layer 3 is the midterm factor, and this is the one that actually determines whether any of this political activity amounts to anything real. Here is the arithmetic. Republicans currently control the House. In a Republican-controlled House, articles of impeachment cannot pass. The Speaker controls the floor schedule. Republican committee chairs control whether hearings happen. The majority decides what comes to a vote. So for an impeachment inquiry to move forward in any meaningful procedural sense, Democrats would need to take back the House in the midterms. And then, after taking back the House, they would need to have enough members willing to vote for impeachment to get to a majority with a new Democratic majority. And then, after the House voted to impeach, they would still need 67 Senate votes to convict, which requires a significant number of Republican senators crossing over. That is a three-step sequence in which every step faces enormous obstacles. Step 1, winning the House in the midterms is possible. Democrats won back the House in 2018 inches, the middle of Trump's first term. It can happen, but it requires winning in competitive districts where swing voters are the deciding factor. Step 2, getting enough Democratic members to vote for impeachment with a narrow majority requires navigating a Democratic coalition that includes members from swing districts who are wary of looking like they are prioritizing impeachment over bread and butter issues. Step 3, getting 67 Senate votes would require a political earthquake that has no precedent in modern American history. No president has ever been convicted and removed by the Senate. The threshold was set deliberately high by the framers precisely to prevent impeachment from being used as a routine partisan weapon, and that threshold has held for over 2 centuries. Now let me also talk about the advocacy dimension, because Free Speech for People and similar organizations play a specific role in the impeachment ecosystem that is worth understanding. These are not congressional entities. They do not have the power to impeach anyone. What they do is build public pressure, develop legal frameworks, recruit member support, and provide political cover for lawmakers who are considering moving on impeachment. They argue that public opinion matters, that if enough constituents are calling their representatives about impeachment, enough members of Congress will be moved to act. And there is historical evidence that this can work at the margins. Public pressure did help move the Democratic House caucus leadership toward the first impeachment in 2019. Ultimately, the question is whether the specific circumstances of the current year, the Iran war, the economic concerns, the fitness debate, the midterm calendar, create enough public pressure to move congressional leadership in a way that the previous rounds of advocacy did not fully achieve. And the honest answer is, we do not know yet. We will not know until we see what happens with the House in the upcoming elections. Let me also go deeper into what the specific articles of impeachment being discussed actually say, because the Iran war connection is the most substantive and legally interesting piece of the current conversation. When Democratic lawmakers talk about impeaching Trump in the current year, they are not primarily relitigating the previous impeachments. The specific argument that has the most legal weight right now is the war powers argument. The claim, and this is an argument, not an established legal finding, is that conducting sustained military operations against Iran without congressional authorization constitutes an abuse of power that rises to an impeachable offense under the Constitution. The War Powers Resolution requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of deploying troops into hostilities and to terminate those operations within 60 days, absent congressional authorization. Trump notified Congress, but the question of whether he obtained adequate authorization for the scope and duration of operations against Iran, and whether the existing authorizations cited actually cover what the military is doing, is a live constitutional dispute. Some legal scholars say the administration's interpretation of his existing authority is reasonable. Others say it is a stretch that goes beyond what Congress actually authorized. And the Democrats who are filing impeachment articles are leaning on the argument that the latter interpretation is correct, that Trump exceeded his constitutional authority, and that this excess constitutes an impeachable abuse of power. Whether that argument is right or wrong, it is specific. It is grounded in constitutional text, and it is a different kind of impeachment argument than the previous rounds, which were more directly tied to discrete events. It gives the current push a legal framework that is harder to dismiss as purely political, even for people who are skeptical of the political motivations behind it. I also want to say something about the 25th Amendment discussion because Democratic lawmakers have been mentioning it alongside impeachment. And I want to make sure you understand what it is and what it is not. The 25th Amendment provides a mechanism for removing a president who is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. It requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president unable to serve. And then, if the president disputes that determination, Congress has to vote by a 2/3 majority of both chambers to uphold the removal. So the 25th Amendment path requires the vice president and Trump's cabinet to take action against Trump, which they have shown zero inclination to do. It requires a supermajority of Congress, which does not currently exist. And it is designed for situations where a president is physically or mentally incapacitated, not for situations where political opponents disagree with the president's policy decisions. Democratic lawmakers who mention the 25th Amendment in the context of the fitness debate or the Iran war are making a political statement. They are signaling alarm about the president's judgment or capacity. But the procedural path they are describing is even further from reality than the impeachment path because it requires the cooperation of people who are Trump loyalists. That cooperation is not coming. So when you see the 25th Amendment mentioned alongside impeachment, understand it as political rhetoric, not as a description of an active or realistic procedural pathway. Let's bring this home. 3 points, and then the most important thing I can tell you about how to evaluate impeachment coverage going forward. Point 1, the constitutional hurdles are real, high, and have not changed regardless of how much political pressure builds. This is not a cynical statement about politics, it is an accurate description of how the system works. The 2/3 Senate threshold exists specifically to make removal of a president a near impossible partisan act, and a possible act only in cases of truly catastrophic and bipartisan consensus. 2 previous Trump impeachments resulted in acquittal because Republicans held together. There is no evidence of a coming Republican Senate defection wave large enough to change that math. Even if Democrats win the House and immediately push impeachment through with a new majority, which would itself be a major political undertaking in a chamber where swing district members are cautious, the Senate math does not change. The political activity around impeachment is real. The constitutional obstacle is also real. And understanding both simultaneously is how you actually evaluate this story. Point 2. The political function of impeachment pressure is different from its constitutional function. And conflating the two is how misinformation spreads. When Democratic lawmakers file articles of impeachment, they are doing something that has political value, even when, maybe especially when, they know those articles will not result in removal. They are telling their voters that they showed up. They are drawing a contrast with Republicans. They are creating a record for the midterm campaign season. They are keeping the conversation about Trump's conduct alive in the news cycle. All of that is real strategic political behavior. And understanding it as strategic political behavior, rather than treating it as evidence that removal is imminent, is how you avoid being misled by coverage that presents political pressure as pending legal consequence. Filing articles of impeachment is a political act. An active Senate trial is a legal proceeding. Those are different things at different stages of a long process with very high barriers between them. Point 3. The midterms are the real test of whether this political pressure ever translates into procedural reality. The elections, House and Senate races across the country, are the actual mechanism by which the current congressional math can change. If Democrats win back the House with a working majority, the conversation about impeachment changes from theoretical to procedural. Committee chairs change, floor schedule changes, what can come to a vote changes. It does not mean removal becomes likely. The Senate math is still what it is, but it means the procedural path from article filing to House vote becomes navigable. And the fact that both parties are already thinking about the upcoming races in the context of Iran, the economy, and constitutional questions about presidential authority tells you that the midterms are where the real stakes of this moment are going to be settled. So here's a practical thing I promise to give you. The next time you see a headline about a Trump impeachment hearing or an explosive committee session or a new proceeding, here's your 4-question checklist. 1. What is the committee name? If it is real, it is a named standing committee of Congress. The House Judiciary Committee is the most likely venue. 2. What is the hearing date? Real hearings are scheduled in advance, publicly noticed, and logged on the official congressional website. 3. Who are the witnesses? Real congressional hearings have official witness lists that are publicly announced before the hearing happens. 4. Where is the official congressional docket? Everything Congress does officially, every bill, every resolution, every committee action lives in the congressional record and is searchable by anyone with internet access. If a video cannot answer those 4 questions, or if it is citing a headline about the Philippines, it is not about a real U.S. congressional proceeding. Save your emotional energy for the actual story. The actual story is substantive enough on its own, and the actual story right now is that political pressure for impeachment is real and building. But the constitutional path forward requires a set of political conditions that do not yet exist, and may not exist until voters have their say in the upcoming elections. Let me also take a step back and think about the media ecosystem around this topic. Because understanding why impeachment content spreads the way it does helps you protect yourself from being misled. There's a specific type of political content that performs very well on social media. Content that makes you feel like something dramatic and decisive is happening right now in Washington. That a hearing is exploding, that a vote is imminent, that the president is about to be removed. That content performs well because it activates strong emotions. And the impeachment topic is particularly well suited to this kind of content because the underlying desire on one side for Trump to face consequences and on the other side for the fighting and the drama is real and powerful and consistent. So when a content creator puts up a video claiming Trump impeachment is exploding in the House, even when it is not, the emotion that video activates is real. The click, the share, the comment, all real. The only thing that is not real is the claim itself. And what makes this especially tricky is that the real political activity around impeachment, the filed articles, the public statements, the advocacy campaigns, the congressional letters, does exist. So there is a kernel of truth embedded in a lot of the misleading content. Something is happening. Democrats are pushing for impeachment. Articles have been filed. There is pressure. But the gap between all of that genuine political activity and an actual House hearing with a date and a committee name and a witness list, that gap is enormous. And the viral content rarely tells you how enormous it is. Here's something worth sitting with as we approach the midterms. Even if Democrats win back the House, even if they push impeachment articles to a new majority, even if a Senate trial actually happens, there is a real question about whether a third impeachment serves the country well, or whether it serves primarily as a tool for both parties to activate their bases without resolving anything about Trump's actual conduct or the constitutional questions at stake. The previous two impeachments ended in acquittal. They did not remove Trump, they did not produce sustained bipartisan accountability, and in both cases, Trump emerged politically energized, using the acquittal as evidence of vindication and as a fundraising tool. A third impeachment that also ended in Senate acquittal because the math does not produce 67 votes could follow the same pattern. That is not an argument against pursuing impeachment if the conduct warrants it. The constitutional remedy should be available even when it is difficult. But it is an argument for being clear-eyed about what impeachment can and cannot accomplish in the current political environment. It can signal that the House believes a president crossed a constitutional line. It cannot remove him without a Senate supermajority that does not exist. And a voter deciding whether to prioritize impeachment or other political goals deserves to understand that distinction clearly. Here's the bottom line. Trump has been impeached twice. He has been acquitted twice. There is no active House impeachment inquiry or Senate trial happening right now. There is real documented advocacy work and real documented congressional support building among Democratic members, particularly around the Iran war powers question. And the moment that matters most for any of that activity to translate into something real is the midterm election. Not the next viral video, not the next filed article, not the next advocacy campaign press release, not the next social media clip about a hearing that does not have a committee name or a docket number. The elections. Because elections are the one thing that actually changes the congressional math. And right now, the math is the entire story. Everything else is political activity happening ahead of the math changing. Whether it ever changes, that is November's answer to give, not the current month's. Let me also address something that often gets lost in the impeachment conversation. The constitutional process is designed to be difficult for a reason. The framers of the Constitution deliberately made it hard to remove a president because they wanted to prevent political factions from using impeachment as a weapon against their opponents. They had seen how impeachment had been used in England as a tool of political warfare, and they wanted to create a system where removal would only happen in cases of genuine, serious misconduct that commanded bipartisan consensus. That design choice has held for over 2 centuries. No president has ever been removed from office through impeachment. Andrew Johnson was impeached and acquitted. Bill Clinton was impeached and acquitted. Donald Trump was impeached twice and acquitted twice. The system has worked exactly as designed, even when the political passions around impeachment have been intense. This doesn't mean that impeachment is useless or that it should never be pursued. It means that impeachment serves a specific constitutional function, and that function is different from the political function that advocates and lawmakers sometimes assign to it. Impeachment is not a tool for expressing political disapproval. It is not a way to signal that you don't like a president's policies. It is not a substitute for winning elections. It is a constitutional remedy for serious misconduct that threatens the integrity of the republic. And whether Trump's conduct in office meets that standard is a question that reasonable people can disagree about. But what is not open to reasonable disagreement is the procedural reality that impeachment alone does not remove a president. Only a Senate conviction does. And that requires a 2/3 majority that does not currently exist. Next time you see an impeachment headline, ask: committee name, hearing date, Witness list, congressional docket. If they don't exist, it's political activity, not constitutional action. The real story is about pressure, arithmetic, and what the system actually allows. The most important chapter will be written at the ballot box.